Welcome back everyone. Let's go ahead and do a comparison between the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE and the iPhone SE 3rd generation that just came out and see which specific phone you should go and pick up. Now I will definitely tell you picking up something like the Galaxy S21 FE may be the better way to go in a feature standpoint, but there are some advantages for picking up something like an iPhone SE 3 and we'll go and talk about that throughout the video. Now if you want to pick up either one of these phones up, links will be down in the description. You can get them from there and you can help support the channel at the same time. Now there are some differences like I mentioned in terms of the body. The iPhone SE 3 has that 4.7-inch IPS panel on the front. You have quite a bit of bezel around it, and this is what I'll definitely tell you. These two phones are supposed to be somewhat budget phones next to each other. Surprisingly, the S21 FE is about $549. The SE 2022 is about $429. So there's not like $1,000 difference between these two. They're only like $100 something difference. With the SE 3's panel, I'm surprised that it's still at this caliber and not necessarily in a good way. You do have a lot of bezel around it. You do have a home button with Touch ID. I like Touch ID a lot. I don't really care about Face ID and all that stuff, but it is a dated design, and that's one thing to keep in mind. When you look at both these phones, you wouldn't believe that there's less than a $200 difference between them, but there is, and that's what's super crazy with this type of design. So lightning port at the bottom of the iPhone SE 3, but the front of the phone, I think Apple could have done better, to be honest. With the S21 FE on the other hand, I think Samsung did a tremendous job. I think it was definitely a decent upgrade from the S20 FE. You have a 6.4-inch dynamic AMOLED display, 120Hz, and it's a 1080p panel, which isn't as crazy as something like the S22 Ultra, but it's still a higher resolution than the iPhone SE 3. So definitely when it comes down to these two phones, you are going to be getting a much better design, as you can tell, than the iPhone SE 3. The main thing the SE 3 has going for it, at least in the front standpoint, is that it is a smaller phone, and some people do prefer a smaller phone over something like a bigger phone like the S21 FE. The S21 FE has a USB Type-C port at the bottom. The SE 2022 model, like I mentioned, has a lightning port. On the back, this is actually kind of an interesting thing. The iPhone SE 3 has a full glass back, which definitely feels pretty premium. Like I mentioned, I like having a glass back on these devices, and it definitely feels much more premium than something like the Galaxy S21 FE that actually has a plastic back on it. So I will tell you, even though the SE doesn't have the best looking front, the back of this phone I think feels better and is much more premium than the S21 FE's plastic back. On top of that, you get wireless charging on both, IP certification on both, but I will tell you in terms of a whole, even though the S21 FE has a plastic back, that design is much better than the iPhone SE 3's. So there is some flip-flopping here, but in terms of the body standpoint, the Galaxy S21 FE definitely wins in my opinion. Now they also have the different type of camera setup on these phones as well. The iPhone SE 3 has that single 12 megapixel wide angle lens on the back, where the Galaxy S21 FE has a triple camera setup, a 12 megapixel wide, 8 megapixel telephoto, then a 12 megapixel ultra wide sensor. On the front, there are some differences as well. The iPhone SE 3 has a 7 megapixel front facing camera. The S21 FE has that 32 megapixel front facing camera. Now I don't know why the S21 FE needs that big of a camera sensor, but you do have the ability of doing 4K at 60 on the front of the S21 FE. The SE 2022 can only do 1080p, which is a little bit dated nowadays, to be honest. I should expect a lot higher resolutions we can film in on the front of that phone. Unfortunately, we do not have that capability there, which is very, very strange. I will tell you though, the SE 2022 model, it does have a decent camera, but it was a decent camera 3 years ago. Unfortunately now, even on a budget phone, it just doesn't really take the cake anymore. It's definitely a dated phone nowadays in terms of the camera. I will tell you though, one thing that the SE has going for it is that within those social media applications that I keep talking about, you are getting a better experience on something like the SE 3 than on something like the S21 FE. But in terms of the features, the hardware itself, and the video resolutions, the S21 FE pretty much wins in those categories. Having that triple camera setup, being able to zoom in and zoom out a lot in a photo or in a setting is a really nice touch to have. And that's one area where the S21 FE really does, do it justice, I think, and even if the camera quality wasn't crazy better than the SE 3's, let's say the SE 3's camera quality was better, the S21 FE, because of the capability behind that lens, it's just at a different caliber. I mean, we're comparing, a triple camera setup that are actually pretty decent compared to the SE 3's single camera. There's just no way the SE 3 can pretty much win here. On top of that, having 4K at 60 on the front is really nice to have. Unfortunately, we don't have that on the SE 3. So I think in terms of the camera setup, the iPhone SE 3, although it does win in the social media applications, the Galaxy S21 FE just wins as a whole in terms of the camera setup. So that kind of covers it up there. Interestingly enough though, in terms of software, the iPhone SE 3 is probably going to be the winner here. It has the latest chipset, and the S21 FE, even though it's kind of, stemming off the S21, S21, it still is about a year old now, and Samsung has increased the software longevity now, but it looks like it's probably going to not last as long, about maybe like a year or 2 years less than the iPhone SE3. So if you want the longest lasting phone between these two, the iPhone SE3 has the higher likelihood, but Samsung could go and increase the longevity again. But Apple can go ahead and do the exact same thing. So it's not as clear cut as some people may want it to look like, but I will say when it comes down to these two, quite potentially the S21 FE isn't going to last as long as the iPhone SE3, but I think that's totally okay, and I don't really have too many problems with that either. Now, moving on to the performance side of things, the iPhone SE3 has that Apple A15 Bionic chip inside of it with 4GB of RAM, where the Galaxy S21 FE has that Snapdragon 888 chipset inside of it with 6GB of RAM on the base models, and it does go up to 8GB of RAM. Now, what I will definitely tell you is that both these phones kind of have their interesting things to them. So with the iPhone SE3, very fast phone. It's the fastest chipset Apple makes for their phones right now, which is awesome. And I will tell you, I've had pretty good performance on my iPhone SE3. I haven't had too many complaints about it. I think it gets the job done for me perfectly well. And like I mentioned, I just don't have that much to complain about with that specific phone. Now, with that being said, I will tell you, having that gesture-based design that we have on the S21 FE really puts that phone in a different, situation. I love having the ability of just going through and using that gesture-based design and not having to wait for a home button for me to register, for it to register and then getting to the recents panel and all that stuff. The home button is archaic, and I don't mind, the speed and performance. And I don't mind, clicking it and everything, but waiting for it to kind of register for me clicking that home button, it's just as slow as my iPhone 8's home button, so they didn't speed that up. Maybe with software updates they can, but with the gesture-based design, you can just go ahead as fast as you can swipe. That's how fast things move, and I love that. Even my Galaxy S9 One UI 2 feels faster than my iPhone SE3 just because of the gesture design, which is so important. So I will definitely say when it comes down to that specific situation, I am getting a better, performance from my Galaxy S21 FE, even though it has an older chipset inside of it. With that SE3, I think that's a great phone. I think it's a great, powerful phone, has so much capability. But the S21 FE, I think, personally wins in terms of overall performance. But when it comes down to actually playing games and everything like that, they are way more similar than not, if I'm being honest. And the lack of the extra 2GB of RAM that the iPhone SE3 lacks, it's not really that big of a deal either. So you're probably winning on the S21 FE in terms of overall performance, but the SE3 is very, very good as well. Ending it off with the battery life, you have a 2018 mAh battery on the iPhone SE3. We have a 4500 mAh battery on the S21 FE. Now, I will definitely tell you the S21 FE wins in the battery life department. That battery life on the device is crazy good, and I'm surprised Samsung put that battery in a phone that's supposed to be kind of like a budget phone in my opinion. So Samsung did a great job in terms of the battery standpoint here, and I think ultimately to kind of sum up this whole entire video, I think the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE is more of a flagship than the SE3 is. For, the extra little bit of money you're spending on the SE3, you are getting a much more capable phone in my opinion. The body of that phone just is so good still, even though it has a plastic back. You're getting reverse and wireless charging, which is great. You're getting Samsung DeX with that USB Type-C port at the bottom. You're getting a very fast phone, and this is a flagship. It's a flagship almost, and that's what the FE lineup I think is. With the SE3 on the other hand, it's a little bit of a different device, it's supposed to be like this budget phone, but it's not really a budget phone. The price is just way too high. If this was a $299, $249 price tag phone, that would be great. Unfortunately, it's not. It's $429, and it's way too close to these type of phones to be even kind of mentioned in the same type of comparison, to be honest. The SE3 I think is a good phone. It's not a good phone for the price. If you're trying to choose which one you like more, I like the S21 FE more than the SE3, but the SE3 still has, the build quality. I would say it has a little bit going there with the glass back. You have, the wireless charging IP certification. You may have a longer lasting phone on the iPhone SE3 as well, but I think the S21 FE is probably the winner here. So that kind of covers it. If you have any other questions or anything, let me know in the comment section below. Hit the like button, that would mean so much, but definitely hit that subscribe button. More importantly than everything else, I love every single one of you guys. Hopefully I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out till then.